Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we were a little delayed beginning, so I'll go ahead and hand it over to the Congressman right away to kick things off.
Thank you, Manal, and thank you to everyone for your commitment to ending the gun violence epidemic. Your strength and dedication to our community does not go unnoticed. I first want to welcome my two guests today, Kendall Pata with Moms Demand Action and Santa Barbara County District Attorney Joyce Dudley, who will be joining us as well today and saying a few words. I can't thank them enough for participating today and being part of our announcement of my reintroducing my Extreme Risk Order Protection Act. I don't need to tell you all that this past Sunday, our community mourned our loved ones who were killed in Isla Vista, in the Isla Vista shooting years ago. 6 were lost their lives and 14 were injured. Like so many shootings, this deadly attack could have been prevented. Gun violence is a deeply personal issue for me. Within my family, I too have mourned the loss of someone who died by firearm. My sister, when I was 12 years old, took her life with my father's firearm, and I was the one who found my sister after hearing a noise that sounded like a gunshot. Went to the living room and tragically found my sister who had taken her life. I understand through my own experiences that there can be warning signs before someone uses a gun to harm themselves or someone else. In the Isla Vista shooting, the gunman had shown signs he was going to commit violence. In the weeks and months leading up to the massacre, the gunman's mother warned local law enforcement about his desire to kill those around him. He posted disturbing videos on social media, drafted a 140-page manifesto about his planning deadly attack, and spent months stockpiling more than $2,000 worth of firearms and ammunition. Despite that disturbing behavior, his family and law enforcement were powerless to keep a gun out of his hands. Following the shooting, California passed a law that allows family members and law enforcement to ask a judge for an extreme risk protection order, a temporary order blocking dangerous individuals from purchasing a gun for 21 days, and remove any weapons they already possess. After the initial 21 days, there's a second court hearing to determine whether the judge's order should be extended up to a year or not. This isn't a new idea. It is based on already established domestic violence protective orders that exist today. They are widely supported by the American people and law enforcement across the nation. However, current law in many states doesn't provide any way to prevent people who show violent and disturbing behavior from buying a gun before they act. Think about that. Even if you know a loved one in crisis who has threatened violence, you would have to wait for that violent act to happen before law enforcement is able to temporarily remove their guns. That makes no sense. Similarly, laws on the books don't stop someone who has been abusing his or her partner from buying a gun, unless there has been a previous domestic violence conviction. Simply put, there is still no nationwide tool that would allow law enforcement and the courts to help prevent tragedies like Isla Vista. Congress must fix that. And we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic, and as we emerge and return to normal activities, there is no better time than right now. That's why today, along with Senator Feinstein, I'm reintroducing the Extreme Risk Protection Order Act, legislation that would give family members and law enforcement the tools necessary to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people. If enacted, our bill would help states implement laws so that family members could go to court and ask a judge to prevent someone who is showing clear signs that they are intent on committing violence from buying or having a gun. It would provide a safety measure for our homes, schools, and communities while preserving due process rights for gun owners, should I say. The evidence clearly states that extreme risk protection order work after the law was enacted. San Diego City Attorney obtained 100 of these orders against people exhibiting a range of violent and threatening behavior, from domestic violence to stalking to threats on social media. Here in Santa Barbara, the county has issued another 21. These extreme protection orders recovered 169 guns, including 16 assault rifles. In one case, law enforcement seized a cache of 56 guns, explosives, and 75 rounds of ammunition. Unfortunately, only a handful of states have red flag laws in place. In most states, families are essentially powerless if they fear a loved one, if loved ones are going to hurt themselves or others with a gun. Using the California law as a model, the Extreme Risk Protection Order Act would provide all states with the same tools, an idea that even the National Rifle Association and the former presidential administration have supported. While no single bill will solve the gun violence epidemic alone, there is no excuse for inaction. We will debate big ideas to stop gun violence, including a ban on assault weapons. More states implementing extreme risk protection orders would save lives. This is a sensible way for Congress to prevent gun violence. I urge all my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, to back this measure to save lives. At the end of the day, it's purely simple. My bill provides grants to states and local communities, incentivizing them to develop these types of laws. There are some nuances with different types of extreme risk order protection laws, and we want to provide states with some flexibility to implement what is best for their communities and jurisdictions. And that's why my bill is so important. In closing, I want to again thank our guests here today and all gun safety advocates who have advanced this issue for years. Your perseverance and dedication do not go unnoticed, and I'm thankful for your continued advocacy to make our world a safer place. I will keep fighting alongside all of you to get real solutions for this very crisis. Thank you. And now it is my privilege to present my guests. We will start with Ms. Kendall Pata from the Moms Demand Action to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Congressman Carbajal, and thank you, District Attorney Dudley, for having me, and thank you, members of the press, for being here. And a big thank you, Congressman Carbajal, for reintroducing this life-saving legislation. My name is Kendall Pata, and I'm the local group co-lead for Moms Demand Action in Santa Barbara. And Moms Demand Action is a national grassroots advocacy group fighting for common sense gun safety measures on the local, state, and federal level. We are honored to support Congressman Carbajal and his Extreme Risk Protection Order Act. Like Congressman Carbajal, I am a gun violence survivor. I'm a mother, a daughter, and a granddaughter living with the legacy of my great-grandfather's suicide by gun. I know all too well the lasting trauma that gun suicide has on our children and families for generations. As Congressman Carbajal explained, after our community was rocked by the Isla Vista shooting, California took action by passing a successful extreme risk law, and that has helped prevent additional tragedies from occurring. But only 19 states have these extreme risk laws, and it's not enough. There have been 194 mass shootings so far this year, and mass shootings only make up 1% of all gun violence every year. It's beyond time that Congress acts. We know that 90% of suicide attempts using a gun end in death, But if you take the gun out of the equation, only 4% of suicide attempts are fatal. In 93% of cases of mass shootings and school shootings, perpetrators exhibited warning signs prior to committing violence. And in 81% of these cases, other people, most often the shooter's peers, had knowledge of the plans prior. As you can see, access to a gun is the difference between life and death. There's no reason not to pass this legislation. An overwhelming majority of Americans on both sides of the political aisle favor extreme risk laws. And I had no idea, Congressman, that our previous president was also a fan, but we also know that gun owners are also in support of this legislation, up to 78% of gun owners. So we wholeheartedly support Congressman Carbajal's ERPO Act, and we know that it would help enable families and law enforcement to save lives and prevent senseless gun violence. So it's time to pass this simple life-saving legislation at the federal level. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kendall, for sharing your personal experience and your story and the loss you've had in your family. Thank you so much. Next, we will go on to our Santa Barbara County District Attorney, a leader on so many issues when it comes to the law, but in particular, gun violence. She is associated with many federal law enforcement groups who are involved in promoting these types of laws and sensible laws that would provide law enforcement more tools to address gun violence. And I worked with Ms. Dudley for many years, and I'm proud to also call her a friend. District Attorney Dudley, our top police official from Santa Barbara County.
Thank you, Congressman Carbajal. So well said. Your professionalism and your passion speaks volumes about why you do the work you do, not just in gun violence, but in so many ways. I so appreciate you, but especially in gun violence. And you're doing all this hard work for all the right reasons. And Kendall, thank you for your demonstration and your passion and your hard work. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a daughter, I'm all of those things. And when I see the countless people whose lives have been destroyed by gun violence, I can't help but ache for both of you and for everybody else out there. But you know what's even more important than when we look back is when we look forward. But last Sunday, I looked back one more time. I went to the memorial site in Isla Vista, where they were memorializing 3 of the students who died, 14 who were physically injured. But what wasn't being talked about, but what I know all too well, was that there were hundreds and hundreds of students, staff, pedestrians, and first responders who were traumatized by these events and remain traumatized to this day. And you know what's most upsetting about all that is it was avoidable. The gunman was a UCSB student, and he also killed himself. He was in possession of guns, and his mother feared he might use those guns in an act of violence. She not only feared it, she not only sensed it as a mother, but she did something about it. She contacted law enforcement. She wanted them to respond, and law enforcement wanted to respond, but they didn't have the power and they didn't have the tools. So she raised the red flag. She raised it, and nothing could happen. But as a result of this horrible tragedy, and you're absolutely right, Congressman Carbajal, when we have to look at laws as look backs, we've already been defeated. But as a result of this tragedy, the law was changed in California. And if we sit here a year from now and this law has not been changed, then once again, we were in a position where we could have made a difference. And once again, we will not have done that. So now in California, mothers and others who do have the authority, they now do have the authority to get those guns taken away. Now I'm so proud that our hometown hero, our congressman, is leading the charge so that we can take this nationwide. He wants to save other people. That is the motivation behind this law. Whether they're from his hometown or his home state is really irrelevant. And he knows this is the best way to do that in terms of when we are aware that a family member knows something is going on and an action can be taken. This important public safety legislation would provide an incentive, which is exactly the way to handle this in a nation as complex as ours. It's an incentive for the states to adopt gun violence restraining orders or similar legislation. He's giving the power back to the states, but at the same time giving them the power to save lives. They can do this through grant funding. And I firmly believe, as a person who's been in the Santa Barbara County District Attorney's Office for 31 years, I firmly believe if California had this law back in 2014, hundreds of lives would not have been destroyed. And with the passage of this law, thousands nationwide can be saved. So I strongly support this law, and I can't thank you enough, Congressman, for taking it to the nation.
Thank you, District Attorney Dudley, and thank you again, Kendall, for joining us today. I can't thank you enough and for your courage and for your continuing to be advocates for these important laws. Thank you for your dedication to ending this crisis and sharing your stories professionally and personally. And I want to thank members of the media that joined us today. I know there's a number of them that are online. Thank you for coming. Thank you for participating and for highlighting this important issue. With that, I'll turn it over to my communications director, Manal, to take any questions that the media might have of Kendall, Joyce, or myself. Manal?
Thank you, Congressman. And yes, I would reiterate, thank you so much to both of our guests here today for bringing such valuable experiences to this event. I will go ahead and open the floor up to questions from the media. You've got two different mechanisms for doing so. You can either click at the very bottom of your screen. You should see an option that says reactions. Click on that, and there's an option to raise your hand. You're welcome to do that, and then I'll go ahead and call on you to ask your question. Your other opportunity is you can just leave your question or say, I have a question in the chat box, and I'll go ahead and call on you that way too. I'll go ahead and give folks a minute to brainstorm questions and raise their hand or leave it in the chat box, however they prefer to ask them. And actually, I can open the floor with one question for Congressman Carbajal. Can you give me a little bit of a sense for the path forward for this bill? Are you hopeful that it'll pass?
I am hopeful that with this new administration who's committed to addressing gun violence and has already stipulated a desire to move guns safety laws forward with universal background checks. And I know this is one of a few that they are looking at having passed into law. This bill, it has been directed to the Judiciary Committee that will look at this particular bill and hold regular order where we would have a markup hearing on it and actually forward it for a vote on the House floor as well. After that, it would go to the Senate and clearly then to the president for his signature. It is really important that we're able to do that. I feel strongly that we will be able to get this over the finish line this term in Congress.
Wonderful, thank you, Congressman. Give it a few more minutes for questions here, but if we don't have any, then we can go ahead and close it out. And oh, gotcha. We got a question from Rachel Showalter. Rachel, you can either unmute yourself and ask your question yourself, or if you do not respond in just a minute or two, then I'll go ahead and ask your question myself.
Hi, Congressman. Thank you, Manal. I appreciate it. I'm wondering if you expect to see much pushback from gun lobbyists moving forward.
there's always pushback from gun lobbyists moving forward. I think of all the bills that I've seen, though, this is the one that has pretty broad support. Not only from the American people overwhelmingly, but clearly from law enforcement. And like I said earlier, I believe even the NRA at one point was flirting with being positive on this idea. The previous administration was positive on this idea at one point, even though nothing ever made it forward. This administration certainly is positive on it. So I really think that for this bill, because it's a grant program that incentivizes states, gives them flexibility, gives them the independence, I think it's a very likely bill that will move forward in a bipartisan way.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. Next questions with Grace McCormick from the News Press. You can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
A little staticky, but can you try it again?
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Is that better?
No, unfortunately, sounds a little robotic.
I can type my
Feel free to say it. We might be able to hear you if you say it slowly.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering, Congressman.
Well, Grace, you can type it up in chat.
Yes. How would I do that? That might be easier.
All right, sorry about that, Grace. We'll just give her a moment to ask your question then. Thanks, everyone. Zoom's been a little challenging today.
That question was for whom and all?
Shouldn't say.
Congressman, can you speak to why you don't think the bill has passed so far, considering that it's garnered bipartisan support in the past? Do you think it's because of strong gun advocates or because of the nature of the previous bills?
I think this has always been a very challenging discussion in Congress because my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have overwhelmingly been greatly influenced by the NRA, and it's almost been unanimous. Luckily, every time that I've introduced this bill, I've gotten bipartisan support, and I'm hopeful that that'll be the case with this bill. I think there is a new climate of openness to moving these type of bills forward. And like I said, this is one of a few that I think have overwhelming support, not only from the American people, but even in Congress in a bipartisan way. And I think that we're going to see it come to fruition. I think there is a slightly different climate in Congress this time around and in this Congress.
Great. And unless we have any additional questions, which I'll just give you all one more minute to compile those. Congressman Carbajal, if you wanted to give a brief closing statement, just outlining your thoughts on the bill and closing things out for us, then if we don't have any more questions, we can close things out.
Well, great. I would love for Kendall and Joyce to maybe say a quick closing remark themselves before I go. Kendall and then District Attorney Dudley, if you want to say some closing remarks.
Sure. I think this Extreme Risk Protection Order Act is just so exciting. From being as District Attorney Dudley said, we are mothers and others, and we are fighting for common sense gun legislation. Our founder Shannon Watts recently said that our elected officials are becoming more afraid of angry moms in red shirts than they are of the gun lobby. So gun violence prevention is really, as you were saying, Congressman, is really, we're moving with the tide, and I think it's time to act and strike while the iron is hot. So we appreciate all of your work on this. And District Attorney Dudley, I so appreciate all your work on safe storage. I know locally in Santa Barbara, we're really working hard on that. And so we appreciate all of your work in that area as well.
Thank you, Kendall. Joyce, or should I say District Attorney Dudley?
No, you should say Joyce. Kendall, thanks for bringing that up. One toddler a day in our country dies because a gun was not safely stored. Sometimes it's by suicide, sometimes it's by another child who shot them. So as soon as Salud gets this one passed, I'm looking forward to him also looking at safe storage. Anyway, what I want to say is, you know, for those of us who are at the funeral, the memorial service for these 6 out of UCSB, we heard Mr. Martinez say, not one more. That's exactly what Congressman Carbajal is saying right now, only it's 7 years later. Not one more. Let's get this passed. Congressman, thank you for everything you're doing so that another mother, another other doesn't have to suffer and doesn't have to hear the words, but there was one more.
Thank you, DA Dudley. So well said by you and Kendall. Thank you so much. Again, thank you for joining me today. I want to thank the members of the media who came today to shed light on this very important issue. Let me just say that I've never been prouder to have received an F grade by the NRA in my life, and than the one I got from the NRA, should I say. And 2, I want to remind our media that are joining us that the American people, poll after poll, time and time again, overwhelmingly, not slightly, overwhelmingly, including members of the NRA, overwhelmingly support sensible gun laws. And this one in particular has very broad support. And I'm hopeful and optimistic that in this Congress, we'll get it over the finish line and start saving lives and making sure that not one more life is lost in our country and here on the Central Coast. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to everybody who came from the media. Hope to see you all soon.
Thank you. Thanks again.